次は阿佐ヶ谷。お出口は右側です。The next station is Asagaya, JB5.
Hello, Nate. Right above my sightline is a postcard that here, I'll just show you. And this one, which you sent to me, geez, like 2 years ago or something. And it's now tripping me up. I see it all the time. It's like front and center on my desk, but now it's just reminding me and making me do like mental double takes because I feel like I've known you for so long, but yesterday being the first time that we had called each other, it's really bizarre, especially because of how familiar it felt. Yeah, happy to kind of be in conversation now, at least. Anyways, I have some questions for you, not about landscape suicide, but because of it. Landscape Suicide being a documentary that you had suggested to me and I watched, and then it led to kind of a bigger conversation surrounding art and, I don't know, ourselves, how we've been, how we interpret X, blank, whatever. And so here are some more questions to explore the same things. First up, how have the books and movies in your life changed you? With no context, what's a picture on your phone that only means something to you? Oh my gosh. What would you like to see for yourself in 2025? What are things that you save for special occasions, the good stuff that you rarely break out? What's the last thing a friend has said that's made you glad to be here? Lastly, give a 1-minute tour of your room without moving your camera.
It's just a human bottle opener. That one time at a wedding party, he broke his front teeth right off. And after that, he was so ashamed of himself that he used to sneak out of the house when it come to shame. Rain forever.
Good luck. Have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.
あなたがこれからするのはどんな旅ですか？旅行？留学？仕事？ 行き先を違っても夢のような旅に出るあなたをスカイライナーは応援しています。もちろん僕も。本日はケンティスカイライナーをご利用いただき。
How are you doing?
We're good. Yeah, I think it worked.
Where your like conversations overlap and you're like, wait, did I tell you that? Or these like running themes and ideas that happen in conversation with other friends. Do your conversations overlap in that way?
I don't think so. I feel like each friend has like their own like distinct, not like purpose, but like avenue of expression where like they each fulfill like different needs, or I can like compartmentalize myself into like different faces, I guess. Like I feel like I don't have like the same relationship with any two friends. Testing. Well, I just feel like I kind of like behave differently with everybody, not in a way where it's like, oh, I'm like a completely different person, but like kind of just pick up on like what person A is more receptive to versus person B, or like certain in-jokes, or like even just like the chemistry will like bring out some weirder behavior, I guess. Like with the person I was just hanging out with, it was like stayed up just like making like stupid jokes, like things that like stopped being coherent, and then like that just like propped us up into like being awake for so long.
Yeah, no, I love that. Do you like seeing like the different versions of yourself?
I don't really consider them to be different. I feel like they're all, especially when I'm like spending time like by myself, I think they're all still there. It's more just like getting a chance to show off, you know,
Yeah.
different sides.
Okay, I feel like we've sat down and tried to do this conversation 3-4 times based on one movie,
Yeah.
Landscape Suicide. And yeah, curious to know, what has it been, like 3 or 4 weeks? What
Maybe
has
2.
stayed?
I don't think it's been that long.
Okay. But a good while. What has stayed with you after all this time in that movie?
Certain shots, actually, some stuff has changed since the last time we talked, which was cool to kind of act on. But for the most part, kind of just like a sense of tone, less of like anything that happened specifically in the movie, but more of like how weird it felt to be watching it, and then the sort of takeaway of like that art can be a little less like rigidly defined, or like have like looser boundaries into like a bunch of different fields of expression. But namely, there's like a section towards the end when again, okay, so the plot of Landscape Suicide.
Oh, right. What is it about?
It's like a true crime sort of documentary hybrid thing where these two different cities are visited under the context of the crime that occurred inside of them, and sort of trying to recreate or like retrace who the people were and like the spaces that they inhabited, and then also just in that sense looking at like the nature itself as like the space that has been inhabited like across the two crimes are like 30 years apart or something, but like across all that time, you know, the nature's stayed consistent or whatever. But towards the back half, they like visit the second city, and there's like a bunch of just stills basically of landscapes and houses and sort of like desolate nature vibes. Like 3 or so days ago, I went on a walk at night with one of my friends and had my little video camera, or my big video camera I should say, like the big clunky one. And I just tried to like capture that same thing of like just filming these like porch lights at night, the unease, trying to like transfer it somehow. It actually reminded me of, do you know the editions of the Raymond Carver short stories that are just like driveways?
I forget that photographer's name, but he's really good at capturing like light and darkness, sort of these like contrasts of oddities of suburbia. There's this like darkness and how liminal they feel.
Liminal's a great word, yeah.
But they feel like everything that I know America to be. So funny that they like exist very close to me. Like having grown up in America, it's just
those houses specifically, or
houses like that.
Oh, okay.
Houses that look like that, the suburbs, and just like that unease of the suburbs. Was it you that recently watched Safe?
Yeah, it was actually.
By Todd Haynes, is it? But yeah, there's that unease in suburbia.
Suburban
like,
alleys.
Yeah. It exists.
It's there,
It exists. Yeah.
But it is like a bizarre thing to try and capture. But yeah, those photos definitely line up to that. So
when you were capturing these videos, like how long did they go for? How long did you decide to shoot for them?
Long, which I guess is different from Landscape Suicide, where they're kind of extended and like build this like mounting dread or like uncomfortability at what you're seeing, even though nothing bad is happening. It's just like something's off, like something is off kilter, because it does reach into that like liminal, weird, like dreamlike space where it's like endless hallways, or just like the flatness of the land itself being kind of like unnerving, and I don't know, like something's off and it's hard to place. And the things that I filmed were really basic in comparison, but it was just nighttime, and for some reason a lot of the port sites were different colors. So like one of them would be like green, or like another would be like red, and it just made for some, I don't know, it just looked cool to me.
Because like those shots in the film are quite extended, I believe. I wonder like how much of it he decided to keep, and if also it is a waiting of something interesting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But like even me with a camera standing, like creating a standstill shot like that for like 30 seconds just feels like an eternity to me, to the point where it does feel uncomfortable. Whereas like a picture you can shoot in like less than a second. So then why is it that when we try to take a picture in an extended amount of time, does it become uncomfortable? Is it because we have to sit with that image? Do we have to sit with Benning's way of looking at nature to the point where nature is inherently looking at itself? Because what a lot of the film does is that it leaves space to think about these murders and how it affects community, but allowing nature to speak up in all of its silence. In all these little snapshots of America that Benning has, but also like what you captured the other night, I think leaves room to think about how nature has a lot to say in terms of how we've changed, or how time has changed, or how inherently time is a character and place is a character.
Yeah, and that you can like sort of sense a history that's imbued, even if you don't know what it is specifically, that, like there's something that is being conveyed. And I think a great example is like how it being landscape suicide like plays into that, in terms of the movie starts with these like expository shots that don't have context. It's before you kind of recognize or realize that it's about true crime, and that these boring or like nondescript locations of some suburb that's like being driven through at night, or a church, or the fountain outside a courthouse, later are recontextualized as the locations where a killing took place. And then you sort of get this interview with an actor playing the murderer. And then those earlier scenes get recolored in a way where they now feel really sinister and like perverse and just warped in like a negative way. And I think playing with that context of like the unspoken history that exists in these places is sort of like the through line of the entire documentary. And so once you have that context of warping what you're seeing, even if it's not one-to-one in the back half where you're bracing for the impact, you know what's coming, even just like the random sort of banal, a barn with a car next to it that's like just covered in snow, it just feels so off and just like so evil and gnarled. And it's so cool because the shots themselves are so simplistic, just have like white noise going on in the background, but still to convey like a really intense darkness through like nondescript, really normal imagery. That was really cool. And like the juxtaposing of letting it speak for itself, because it's not like very overt as a message either.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, like, do you think there is inherent evil in simple scenes and simple moments?
I think it kind of leads to like, do you believe in ghosts, maybe? Because I feel like they're kind of similar. Like, a house is not just a house, you know, like whoever was living there before, et cetera. And I'm not super superstitious, but I don't know, I guess I definitely do believe that context exists, I guess. So like in terms of imbuing like basic places with like a depth or like importance there, I don't know, I don't have like a concrete answer.
Interesting you say that, because Benning also includes context as distraction. There's those sound bites and of the legal hearings, as well as things on the radio, top 40 songs, and it also provides a context to what it is, but it intrudes upon landscapes, it intrudes upon photographs and written testimonies and evidence as well, in a way that it is of its time and shows it's of its time. And without it, sitting alone, if you just listen to the song itself alone, outside of the film, it just adds something very different to what is occurring within this sort of documentary that he created.
I think again it sort of is the juxtaposition of like the sight and sound, which I guess just like blanket definition would be like the point of experimental cinema, is to like create some interplay between the two in like an interesting way. But you're right, I mean the songs themselves are just like top 40 pop hits or a random sermon that's playing on like an FM station. I don't know, they're so specific and they work to like characterize the people that are living there. Because I feel like less so than the murders themselves, it's kind of trying to just contextualize and give you like the history of the places that they occurred in themselves, like the cities, and give you like a broad idea of the people and types of people that were living there at the time and were affected by the news of like the crimes themselves, and like the sensationalist aspect of it. And so a lot of it does seem out of place or like disconnected, but at the same time it's so specific to a time and like to that era of, I don't know, like the 80s/50s that they were living in. I thought it was really cool.
With all this, does it change any way that you might approach art or create art in a way? Because you do, I think, something that Benning does is archive. I think what you've created with like your site and just like your vlogs too, or just like your sit-down chats, there's this ease and scrambling to create houses of everything that you love in sort of like a great grand collage. But I love all of the sort of tiny homes that you create for all the ways that you make art, especially with like your music that you sent me. I'd like listen to it on the subway and just like hearing those sounds in conjunction to like the city sound and the subway, it just added to the, I think, the beautiful way that you create art. It's this orchestrated glance of all the diegetic things that glue and connect to you, and I think that's so special.
Well, thank you, first of all. But diegetic and like archiving are definitely like synonymous with what I think I'm doing, regardless of like how it's being interpreted, which I'm not saying like you're wrong actually, because this is what I'm doing, but it's more of that it is in sync. Because I don't think I'm doing anything super special per se, but I think I am focused on like a similar aspect of like Benning, where like things can speak for themselves, and that through context alone, the vlogs, whatever stitched together videos or whatever I'm choosing to record, will like mean something very different to me than whoever consumes it, purely just because of the context of like, I know that, you know, this was a video I took right before blank event happened, or that this would be the last time I saw my friend before they moved, or that this was like this anticipatory moment, whatever. But I think it's like sort of like a frame of mind that I feel like has helped me navigate a little better, where I place importance on things even if I don't recognize the value in them initially, just because I know that later on, regardless, it'll take on a new meaning anyways. And it's something I think it kind of stems from like a political framing of like archiving of like a written history, or like something that you don't have to record anything special. And I think a lot of like documentary period isn't doing anything special. It's just recording the time and place of the moment, and that later on it gets a sort of imbued sense of like history or importance or value, or functions as like a representation of that time. Like everything eventually becomes a time capsule on its own. And so I think like viewing my current life or like the current day, whatever, through that lens, that like I'm gonna want to look back on this 3 years from now, even if it's just this very mundane breakfast I'm having. Like everything can be romanticized and like elevated to certain degrees. And I think viewing it in that way like takes a lot of the pressure off, where like even if I don't initially like it, I still know that like I'll like it as like an example of like a rough draft, or like me being clumsy and bad at something. Like it's kind of just like looking ahead, this like optimistic spinning on like it doesn't really matter, which like initially I think I took in a more like existential way. But yeah, I feel like the archiving such like art aspect has definitely helped like a lot of how I'm like navigating the world.
No, that's really beautiful. I love that you spoke about optimism in that way. Do you think that then optimism occurs in the making of archiving or in reflection?
I think
like how often rewatch your own vlogs, say, or like re-listen to or reread your own thoughts in journals and such? Is optimism there, or is optimism in the making?
I think optimism, for me at least, is definitely in the making. I don't revisit like my old videos. I try to avoid it at least. I've done it and I haven't enjoyed the experience, I can say for sure. But I think it just comes down to, in the moment, I feel like it makes me feel better about whatever's going on. Where recording a video especially, I feel like is a really simple like a reinforcing of like, this is important, of like, I'm gonna want this later, because that's essentially what you're saying by choosing to take a video. Is like, this is worth keeping. And so I think it sort of extends past like, this is worth keeping, where it's like, this life is worth living, or like this experience is worth celebrating. And so I think like in the moment, just like choosing to record for me is like this sort of like symbolic extension of like, I'm okay, like things are good, I'm good, 2 thumbs up, you know. But in terms of revisiting it, I feel like maybe it'll come later. I feel like I just might be too close to it. I haven't been online posting or sharing things that I've been made for too long. It's been maybe like 2 years or so, maybe a little longer. But I feel like maybe with time, like the joy will come from revisiting it and like trying to re-tap into whatever like creative, emotional mindset I'm in, because I recognize that I'm doing pretty good, and that like these are probably going to be like the good old times sort of thing. But yeah, for now, it's like just an in the moment thing. What about for you? I feel like, not to like answer for you, but I feel like there's a lot of like the post production that goes into like elevating your videos and like framing them in like a stylistic or like distinct way. Do you like looking at like the finished product of like, I've turned something mundane into this like really poppy and jazzy and like sexy thing, or where's your head at when you're making something?
Yeah, poppy, jazzy, sexy is where I want to be. I enjoy capturing everything and adding it all up together to create something. It is taking the unspecial and making it special in that way. But it's really how I experience life. I think most of the vlogs is orchestraic in a way where it is bombastic. And I don't think you can always capture that within the medium itself. It's all these added materials that you have to include to make it more bombastic. So all of it in editing, which I've come to appreciate a lot more, is an exaggeration or an accentuation of the feelings that were once captured. It's like, how does one go back to like those big angsty feelings you felt as a teen, write them in a way that still feels natural and real and raw? I always think that like you can only capture that when you're a teen. So it always like confused me how adults wrote young adult in a way, because, you know, young adults aren't writing young adult, right? People are writing them as adults. How do you go back and write those real raw feelings? Editing is a great place to do all of that. But I was going to ask, what happens to the footage that you don't use? Is there like a backlog of stuff that hasn't made it to a vlog or to part of your music? What do you do with that? And how do you decide to use it, if you do at all?
I feel like right now I'm kind of in the midst of that, because the collecting doesn't stop, but like the output has definitely slowed to a crawl, I would say. And initially I would just go back and like compile whatever without really any discretion of just, this is everything that like I thought was worthwhile at the time. Because part of it is also like that later I might not feel the same way, but it's more just about like during, you know, whatever date like I did find value in it. I mean, I don't know, for like the last 3 months I haven't really done any of like the output stage, and I still have, for now I guess they just live in like a folder. I have like 90 or so pictures and I'm like, I should do something with these. I actually finished my first cassette, so I like shot like the whole hour on that analog camera, so I have that, and I haven't done anything with that yet. I don't know, I guess they just kind of sit on my desk. I mean, the goal is to put them somewhere. I'm not too like stressed about finding a place for it, and for the most part not that much stays on like the editing room floor. I think especially like in the last year I've like had like a very averse relationship to editing, not in like a combative way, but just in terms of like what I'm trying to do or like produce or like exude, whatever. I've just kind of enjoyed leaving things uncut, and so I'm trying to think about how many things I have like in the backlog already, because it's been like on my to-do list forever is to like update my website with something, but it'll get done eventually, I guess.
But I think that's also the thrill of like trying to find its place. That's the excitement of like trying to find reason or something. I think the reasons come after. We have all of it, and then something clicks in our head and we think, oh, this is where it should be. This is how it should be done. That can only happen if you're alive. You know what I mean? And you continue to stay alive, and you continue to just keep on living, which is so beautiful in a way. That's how it's done. It can't be forced in any way. Things
like recreated from like an outside perspective.
But no, I love the beauty that you've provided.
Hell yeah, nice.
Cut or uncut is it's all good stuff.
Cool.
We talked about a double billing of this movie. I think I decided Fargo would be a really great double feature to pair with.
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah, it's sort of the static landscapes, the snow, but also the inherent violence. If we're to think about, like, if something sinister exists in the underbelly of the unspoken parts of America, I think Fargo really represents that, and also because of its sort of like crime thriller nature. Yeah, what would you pair with the film?
I'm still pretty drawn to like the experimental aspects of it, although I do agree wholeheartedly. Like, I wish I came up with Fargo, because I do think it works like to a T really well. Even just with like the snow-covered like flat landscape and sense of mounting dread throughout it, because of like that sort of on the run like crime spree, whatever. It kind of goes hand in hand with like the Wisconsin aspect, especially because they both center on like violent crime. Anyways, I'm just basically saying that I actually want to choose Fargo also, but just in what I was thinking beforehand, I was kind of thinking more like experimental, because I do think that there is a lot of, not challenging per se, but it is like definitely slow and like methodical and affronting. Like, intentionally it's trying to like veer you off course, not like mislead you, but it's like testing you a little bit. I think especially with like the opening of the movie, where it's like just like unbroken, constantly repeating tennis serves for like 3 minutes straight. You're like, okay, I gotta like, let's sit up straight for this one. I would go double billing. Short by Takashi Ito, I think. I would go specifically with Spacy, which is the one that's shot in a gymnasium, because there is like a sort of like formal element to Landscape Suicide where it's videos, but it's also kind of just a slideshow towards the tail end of like all these like different landscapes. They're really sharply cut, especially because they're paired with like white noise, and so it'll like, the frequencies will like just be really harsh and then suddenly let up, and so it's really like stilted and sort of like jarring experience. Takashi Ito did a lot of like stop motion stuff where he made videos through only photography, so everything would just be a still or a frame, and he would sort of like set them up to go into each other. It's maybe a little further into like the experimental realm than this was, but, and also I don't think I'd be able to like sit through both. So I would probably need something like balance it out instead, but it's definitely a comparison that I was making internally.
Yeah, no, that's a great comparison. I feel like Bending is sort of a drawn out Ito, where Ito, it is very choppy stop motion to create this space, where Benning's space is really just too drawn out to the point where you really have to focus. Ito, I think, creates the plot within the speed
the movement
of
itself. Yeah.
That's perfect billing.
Because I also had some questions. I want to make sure I don't miss out on anything. Oh, this was a fun one. Okay, so the sort of amorphous endings, right? I don't remember how like we even got to it in terms of trains of thought, but kind of the idea of like how much of Landscape Suicide relies on the recontextualizing of images, basically like everyday images that like once you're like, oh, but this is actually a crime scene, or like the location where this woman died, you're looking at it in a completely different way. So it'll show, you know, like a cul-de-sac essentially, and then tell you what happened in the cul-de-sac, show it again, and you're like, there's a before and after going on, which is kind of the point of like a narrative basically. And so looking at that in terms of like an ending, or like an opening versus an ending, or like this kind of point of story, looking at sort of examples within film of showing something, showing it again, and like it just breaking you, even if it is something mundane. Initially, the example that I had was because I just watched Mishima, the Yukio Mishima sort of biopic, the day that we had initially tried to talk to each other. And that movie opens with a sunset and then closes with a sunset. I'm like very sort of like anal, I guess, about openings and like opening credits. Like I'm really judgy, just because it sets the scene, it sets the tone. Like it's so telling of like what you're trying to invoke, and so you should like swing. You know, you should like aim high. I remember being like disappointed, basically, that I was like, this is a sunset, really? We're just having text over a sunset, okay? And then the movie ends with that same sunset, and like it just broke my heart. Like it was like gut wrenching, and I was like, the way that it was able to like completely reframe basically everything, like just showed like how grand of a story that it was able to tell. And so yeah, I would love to kind of just look at like examples or whatever of showing something, showing it again, and just like boom.
You're gonna make that, right? Top 10 openings to films and closing ends to films.
I have like a list on Letterboxd for like opening credits, but I definitely need to like work in the films towards the end.
Yeah, that'd be really cool to look at. Because no, that's a choice. How you begin a film is a choice. Stories are about choices. How you start a film and how you end a film are choices, and they're the choices that stick with us. I think however you end a film, that is the last image that we are left with and left to think about.
It's usually like resenting.
Yeah, and it should, because there is that very stark moment where you're sitting in a theater watching a movie and the lights come up and you're like, oh, okay, I have to go back to my regular life now. You know, all my time spent in the dark, but this story ends. And how should it end but with a thought, and how I should carry that thought into my real life. I think last time we spoke, I had just come out of seeing The Brutalist matinee.
Yeah.
The ending of that movie spells out the entirety of the film in its remaining 2 minutes, and it's just like, no, it has to be without words, because it's a movie.
It hits you with a sledgehammer of like context, yeah, in like such like an overt and like intrusive way. Yeah, I was also really off-put by the ending. I think that's like what led the conversation initially of like more like subdued, sort of like open-ended, ambiguous endings to films.
I want that room to think, you know? Don't think for me, you know? I got a brain, all right? Let me think. In contrast to that, I have thought, like, has there been a movie where it ended in speech or in text where you were just like, whoa, okay, let me rethink this?
I mean, there has to be. I'm sure that there is, but I've been like so specifically like sifting through my thoughts for like the opposite that I'm like, they're already tucked away. Like I would have to like do some digging. But that's a great question. Because yeah, I feel like I'm kind of more inclined or like drawn to the opposite of like just like a profoundly like moving image or like action or like something that like is a bit less direct, maybe like metaphorical or whatever, but an image that will stay with me less than like, oh, through this like final speech like everything has been recontextualized, because even that feels a little cheap to you know, pull like this rug pull at the end and be like, actually nothing was what you thought it was, the end. Like, but I'm sure that there has to be one example of like an ending line that is just like gut-wrenching or something. It's not coming to mind. Do you have something that comes to mind? That's
something I have to think about. That was a question that came out of when I was just like, wait.
No, that's a good question though. I would hate to like open up like a letterbox list or something and like start checking. I feel like, and this is kind of just a pet peeve, I guess, like in terms of like recommending books or talking about favorites, like if a conversation ever strikes up, like it has to be something that lives up here. Like I can't like dig for like some good example or like something haughty or whatever, but haughty as in like HAUG whatever. I'm not haughty like as in like hot girl book, but if it's a favorite or it's something that you want to like recommend, like you have to like know it and like own it, you know? So like I would hate to like dig through like some like my like letterbox watch list and be like, oh, actually this movie's perfect, like this one. It's like it's not living up there. But for like ambiguous endings, there are some that definitely live up there. Like even though it's like a beloved or like a popular choice, the ending to 400 Blows, I feel like for me was like oof, like I felt that one, and it also like meant so much within the context of the movie, and like without saying anything, just like sort of following, and then just like, ooh, it's so good, it's so good. It's just like a boy's face on a beach, but it's like thinking about like how profound that moment was and like trying to like recapture that, this sort of implication of like it's just about this moment and not about like the after effect or the punishment or like the end result of like, and I don't know, I just really love that.
Again, it's there's this beauty to context and recontextualization of images in film that I think works so beautifully in movies. But what about for books? What about for like photographs alone? When we shoot something as a photograph, can it be recontextualized within itself instead of like, say, lodging it elsewhere?
Almost like exclusively to photographs. I feel like they're a medium that doesn't rely on context in like any direction of like pre and post. Whereas like in books, everything is dependent on like what came before and what comes after. Infinitely becomes recontextualized, and like the further you read, like the more layered or recolored or etc. But a picture can just exist on its own, kind of in like a filmic lens as well, where like just because something is shown doesn't mean it's real. Like there's like a fictive element to seeing a movie, period, even though on like a surface like reality level, like it is something that is actually occurring and happening, but there's like this strange like distance that it's like, because it's fictive, it's, you know, not real, but through just a photograph, like you're missing all of that. Like you're missing any before and after, and you're missing anything outside of the frame itself. Like Susan Sontag has a quote, which I don't remember off the top of my head, but it kind of touches on that, of just how photographs don't need any context to exist, and sort of uniquely so, and how they can sort of dilute the message that they're trying to deliver because of that it becomes this sort of like really tricky, like it requires some trust from an audience in terms of accepting what you're being shown.
Ooh, that's really beautiful. I need to get to that Sontag. But
yeah,
there's
this. I could remember. I'll look it up just because now I'm bothered, but I'm not going to claim that, you know, this is a quote that I hold dear or anything, you know.
What Sontag have you read?
Oh, jeez, I don't even remember what the names of her books are. Against Interpretation and Other Essays, I think, is one. This one is from like On Photography. I need to read more, but she's quoted a lot, and I remember this specifically was in the book Amusing Ourselves to Death, which is like that one sort of like book about like TV culture, or like TV consumption, and the reason why they brought it up, they were like talking about how the medium that something is recorded on becomes as important as what it's saying. That like the quote, like the medium is the metaphor. That like you're limited by the form of expression that you choose on like what you're able to say or what you're able to convey. And so at one point, like the transfer from like written information to television, which was like now this complete different thing from like written word to image, that you gained something, but that you also lost something by having it be this like thing that created its own context and also sort of warped a lot of things. I honestly didn't really even like the book that much, to be honest, but I remember what it was trying to say. But anyways, I don't think I'm gonna find it, but Susan Sontag comes up at one point. It was awesome. It had to be there.
It had to be there. What trusting images are in your head right now?
Ooh.
Is there like a photograph or moving images that just appear in your head sometimes? You're just like, I had to be there.
Maybe ones that I've taken, but like in terms of like blanket statement photography, honestly, I'm not that well versed, weirdly. Or I guess maybe not weirdly. I feel like sort of like a big MO that I have is like avoiding certain media to like not be influenced, or like to not have it sort of subconsciously guide what I'm looking for, or like consider to be good. And I feel like I do that in like a lot of aspects, like in terms of like watching certain reviews or like YouTube videos. Like I would hate to like watch a review of a book and then come away from it like and feeling like I should echo that, or that I agree despite not having read it. Like it warps your expectations like going into something. And with photography too, I felt that a lot, where the one photographer that I really like looked up to, or like was studying, or whatever you want to call it, was like Daido Moriyama, who was like a black and white street photographer that's like very like just in the moment, like just take and go, and like less focused on the composition and form, like just sort of like left field stuff. And I remember being like, this changed everything. Like, whoa, art doesn't have to be like as uptight or like difficult. Like I can do it too. And then so like I feel like my initial venture into taking pictures was like just copying him, which isn't a bad thing. And I feel like that's how you start anything. I've felt like an apprehension towards that in like every other medium, or like I feel that in like anything where I look at someone like that is like established or confident, or like has something that I'm like relating to, and I'm like, I want to be that really bad. I need to stop looking, because like I also just want to see like what I'd come up with on my own. And so like in terms of like photography, like he's the only photographer that I've like really pored over or like purchased art books of or anything like that, because I do feel like really easily influenced. I kind of dislike that as an idea. And so yeah, just in terms of like photographs that come to mind, like a lot of them are just ones I've taken, because like those are the only ones I really look at, which is kind of like a self-absorbed answer. But I made it in like a almost like defensive way, where like I know that like if I looked at like other works, I'd be like so taken in and like drawn to. Like I feel like it's really easy to like get enamored with like something because it's also new and exciting. I'm trying to like channel that like inwards. So I don't think I'm like crazy good or anything, but like I'll go through my photo book a lot.
No, I think that's really special. I don't think it's self-absorbed in any way. It's you're allowed to be proud, Pato. You're allowed to be happy.
It's not even that I'm proud. I feel like it's almost the opposite. It's like I recognize like the room for growth in it, and it's like liking something despite it being bad. Like even if it's just like a random photo of like my friend who's like half asleep and like just like eating some meal, and I'm like, this is so sweet, and like I captured this energy, and look at the soft focus, and like so much of it is unintentional too, especially because I'm like shooting on film, so it's like I'm not seeing it until it's the finished product, and so I'm like kind of just surprised at how it's turning out. I'm like, oh, this is actually really cool, like in a way that wasn't intentional.
That brings me to your video essay on making bad art, and I think you did mention Dido in that video essay. Is that right?
I sure did. Yeah,
I think that's part of it. I think we have to, what is it, be an amateur at everything in order to be great at the things that we like, right? No, I think there is a beauty to that, and I love that about you and everything that you archive. It's good to see people hungry about the world.
Oh yeah.
Curiosity, you know what I mean? I feel like curiosity is so alive in everything that you do, and I think that's really special and special to keep.
Do you feel the same way in terms of like your artistic process? Do you feel like the people that inspired you initially to like be like, oh, this as a vocation, like writing as a vocation is like something I want to pursue, versus the people that like give you like sparks and like really big, you know, upticks and like sort of like a manic energy of like, this rewired my brain and I need to like act now? What's like the through line there?
Growing up, much like you and Dido, a lot of writers, much like Joan Didion, Ingmar Bergman, in terms of writing, just really just shattered how I saw the world.
Did they write books or their screenplays?
Joan Didion's books, Ingmar Bergman's scripts. Oh, who did I just say?
The Spectre.
Oh, The Spectre. Guess I don't love him that much.
Yeah.
Just like wrote in ways that just, shattered my worldview and really changed everything. I would say I was like a Didion imitationist for a long while, until, it's that thing where it really does just take time. Time will tell, and tell you who you are, to really shape you into who you want to be and comfortable being. They really did that for me.
Do you look at that like negatively at all? Like in terms of being like a Didion like imitation?
Yeah, I feel like
something endearing about it, of like being so moved to action that like you're just aiming at like this like pinnacle that you've just experienced. Like if I can get 1/10 of this, like I'll be so happy.
Yeah, no, you have to go through all the bad writing, you know, all the bad imitation in order to get to the good stuff. So I'm really happy with the practice. I just look at it as practice, in terms of all the writing that I do have now. Because what I was writing way back when, I hate to say this, but like girl poetry or like bedroom poetry. There's that line at the end of Lost in Translation, which I know is a film you didn't like.
I didn't even finish it. Yeah, so let's see what's at the end.
Let me spoil it for you, but she talks about this thing where, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I take stupid pictures of my feet and I write bad poetry.
Spoil? Wait, I need to watch that movie again. Hold up.
You should. It's a really delicate, beautiful end, but it goes back to that thing where all that bad stuff has to happen. All that bad stuff in the nothingness of your 20s have to happen in order to get to where you want to be. And it just has to happen, because if it doesn't, then you just stay constipated, I feel. But no, it goes back to your video essay. It has to happen. All that bad art has to happen, not just for the fun experimental end to it, but also to shape who you are and your interests and how you want to be.
Yeah, I feel like it's just sort of like a conclusion you have to come to in terms of like pursuing art as like part of your life. Like even if we're having like very roundabout like ways of reaching the same conclusion, like we are just sort of saying the same thing of like, you just have to do it anyways, and like even if like it's just representative of the moment, and even like if in the moment you don't see any value in like what you're doing or like the output that you're producing, that it's still worthwhile just in terms of like you still spent the time practicing and trying, and that later on, you know, maybe you'll look back on it in like a very different light, and in like an endearing way where it's like it's so sweet to be that clumsy and like still be like trying and like trying loudly. Yeah, I don't know. It's sweet though.
No. Yeah, it's really beautiful the way you put it. It really reframes how I see context in terms of like context as conclusion. I think context finds itself when you have everything, and context is what you use to form it all together, curate it in a way. You really have to. There's a thing I always hated hearing though. Like when I was younger, I was just like, you just have to do it. And I was like, why? But why do I have to do it? You know, but it really is true.
I feel like so many of like the big epiphanies that I have or have had like in my recent years have just been cliches, but they're cliches that I'm reaching like through my own trains of thought. So when I land on it, like it just rings as like so profound and true, even though I then like reduce it down to like some like keychain phrase, and I'm like, wait a minute, were they right the whole time? And like, is everyone in the world having the same like set of epiphanies and like realizations about like, oh, this really difficult and like confusing to navigate life situation is like manageable in these small like truisms. It like makes me feel like very connected to like the world at large, when like it's like I'm entering into the same conversation that everyone has been having for the last like 1,000+ years, and I'm like, I did it, like I made it to the club.
I'm part of the club. I'm here, guys. Yeah. But no, yeah, I was totally against cliches. But, you know, they're there for a reason. And
because they are all true. And if you don't think they're true yet, it's because it's not like applicable to your life. But like eventually you'll like have this like quarter life, midlife crisis, and you'll like go through this like agonizing stretch of like self-reflection, and you'll land on something where it's like as simple as like what will be, and it's like it's so like trite and like small and like easy to like minimize, but at the same time like it is such like a profound and like huge revelation to like to believe it, you know.
That's where my interest lies though, is the coming about, the roundabout way, how all these stories come to the same conclusion, but it's the way you tell the story and how you present it, or whoever tells the story, is where I think my real interest lies. I think it's why I consume so many books and films. I just love how, no matter how many centuries of stories that we have had, they're all so singular in themselves and different. Though they may, you know, cross over in themes or whatever, it was a story that someone told, and it was a story that was presented in a way that, in all of the images or choices of words that they used, some of them have remained with me. I love that.
I feel like it's another like aspect of like connecting to humanity as a whole, of like interacting with like a small scale or like personal piece of art, whether it be like a movie that someone made or that's like about their life, like coming back to like 400 Blows, like just this random event in like Truffaut's life of like him as a youth and like running away from whatever juvenile thing. You're able to connect to someone's like experience, even when it's so specific to the point that it's like alienating, that because there's so much distance, it like wraps around to feeling fictive and easier to connect through in that way, even though it's being so honest that it's like, I don't care about anything else. Like that's another aspect that I really love, when like you're reading something that just or watching something and it just is clear how necessary it was for the person to make it. It's like another aspect of like, I'm being moved by this, and because of that I feel like connected to humanity as a whole, where like we are all just trying to tell our own stories and like feel seen in some way, even though like it boils down to like something again trite and reductive and cliche. It's like it's so true, and it's so cool to like commit to it or like be okay with it. I don't know.
That reminds me of your recent top favorites video, and you had mentioned The Seas by Samantha Hunt, and I think in all of its totality, you're with it throughout the entire book, start to finish, in this, you know, teen angst, and it keeps going and going, leads into different ways, and you're just like, wow, that really happened. I'm thinking of like the tears and what she does with the tears at the end of the book.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just like, wow, you wrote that scene, but it makes so much sense, and I'm here for it. Speaking of like real raw emotions, those are emotions that had to happen in the book, and emotions that were met, and it's a fine ass story.
For some reason, that reminded me of like the question that you posed earlier of like movies that end with like a great line of dialogue, and as soon as this ends, I'm immediately I'm gonna go through everything. Like I know that there's one that's gonna stand out, and I'm really excited to see which one it is, because I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's there. Like it's somewhere.
Yeah, can't wait for the top 10
best endings that say nothing or something.
It's beautifully done this time around. Our little chat here.
Sweet.
Let the good people know though. What are you reading now? What's going on? What was the last thing you watched? What was the last book you read?
I'm trying to think. I've been renting a bunch of DVDs from the library, so I've been watching a bunch of movies like that. I just watched Drive My Car, which is based on the Murakami short story. It's by, I think his name like Ryunosuke. I don't know his name off the top.
Ryunosuke Hamaguchi.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just watched that. I've been like on a kick of like long movies, like 3 hours. Like I'm trying to just sink into something for a bit. I watched that. I watched Nashville as well. I just finished.
Ooh.
And then
nice.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. There was another one. I can't remember right now. I'm trying to envision what the stack of DVDs is. So I went like on like a Wes Anderson kick for a second. I watched the Darjeeling Limited and Life Aquatic.
Nice.
He has some cool like fictive elements where I can't figure out like what it's doing specifically when he reveals his hand, so to speak, of like showing you that things are staged. When he does that, does it make it more or less real? I cannot like figure out which it's doing, and it's like I don't know. It's so bizarre because it's like it's showing you like there's a hole in this wall and like it's a set essentially. And by doing that, like, is it more real because he's showing you like the stage hands literally, or is it more staged because you know that like that was like written into the scene and it's all like for effect, you know?
That's funny you say that, because I think that's a question he recently asked himself in Asteroid City, where the film like breaks its own mold and become like one of the characters leaves the stage. And it becomes this like other play, and it's like the two people from different casts speaking to each other. Is this like real? Is this what am I doing here? It's that big question, and I think it's a decorative question that Wes Anderson is still questioning himself.
I forgot that he like addresses it so like clearly, and I definitely need to rewatch that because I've gone on to like watch maybe like 4 more movies. I think at that point I'd like only seen like Grand Budapest Hotel and like Fantastic Mr. Fox or something. So I definitely didn't get like the layers that was going through. But yeah, that's a good like light post or like lighthouse that you're like aiming me towards. Because it's a question I've been having. It's nice to know that he answered it.
I don't know if he answered it.
Well, he addresses it, I mean.
And I think it's a question he'll still continue pushing. I think he started with Grand Budapest Hotel. That's where that question of like, oh, is this real or is this staged, in sort of this like dollhouse kind of way, but it's also like this looking back in time kind of way. So it is a self-reflection of his own work, and that the question really makes itself obvious in Asteroid City. But you know, with your recent, I think you also mentioned Bottle Rocket in your top.
Yeah, that's another one that I really liked.
It's fun to see the debuts and.
Yeah, because you still see so much of like the framework, like the skeleton that like just keeps getting built off of.
I feel like less of his decorative side exists in Bottle Rocket because it's so amateurish. I mean, you still see it, I think, like in the hotels and everything. There's less of a focus there and more of a focus on like his characters. He really loves people and how they interact. And what I think he loves doing is going to family parties. Christmas, Thanksgiving, and just watching people scramble and talk over each other. I think that's where he gets his kink.
Maybe.
and he just like recreates that in his
really,
films.
really, really festive.
For me, I just finished watching, what the hell is it called? I just watched it.
You've been on a tear lately. I know that January was a busy, busy month.
February kind of quieted down,
I feel
but
that.
Poison.
Is that
I
like the
watched
Sapphic
Poison by
movie?
Todd Haynes. One of the stories at Sapphic, it's like 3 stories in one, but they like
Is
overlay
Isabelle
and
Hubert in it, or Hupia, or whatever that you say, however you say it.
did she star in a Todd Haynes film?
I don't think so, but I think I'm getting like my directors mixed up.
Carol, Safe, May, December.
He did May December. I didn't even know that. That's cool.
Yeah. But I think you'd like Poison. It's really, really interesting.
Heard.
What if you liked Safe in terms of like the queer body as metaphor? It's like really he does not hit metaphors. It's like really direct and Poison. I'm really enjoying these Fireflies press books. This one's Inland Empire, and basically what it is that this person is assigned to film / director, and they just like write this essay / memoir around it, like their literal film experience and like life experience with said film or
Like
director.
surrounding the watching it.
Yeah. I just wanted more like film essays and essays on film.
That's cool.
So, yeah, it was good. And yeah, I kind of want to rewatch some of David Lynch's films.
Do you have a favorite? Just like blanket.
Lost Highway.
Lost Highway is pretty cool.
Oh, you watched it?
I have seen it. Yeah.
It's wild, right? I think
I
it does
love the
everything
first
that
half.
Lynch.
I feel like it is like it is Lynchian, like to a detriment as well. I feel like it like bleeds into like the confusing and just like overly erotic sort of like I don't know what's happening, but like let's just enjoy like the sensory overload. But the first half, yeah, that's like one of like the most lasting Lynch scenes to me, which is where they're at the party and that random guy shows up and he's like, "I'm in your house" or whatever. He says it more creepily than that. He's not like delivering the line as emptily as I am.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna like try and like imitate this creepy goblin man or whatever. But he just like tells him to call his house and like he answers from like for some reason it just like stuck with me so much. I was like, this is so like wrong and gross, and I like hate that I don't feel safe in like any context.
I don't even like how you even come up with that is beyond me. But the last half of the film loses you.
Yeah,
but
me personally,
I think there's a lot of fun in trying to figure out why all of this was happening. It's a good one. Do you have a favorite?
I think Mulholland Drive. You know, it's a classic for a reason. It was my first Lynch though, so I feel like it set the bar like so high. And I also saw it in theaters, and I also didn't know anything about it. I was just like blind date with movie sort of thing. That one like blew my mind. Like I like came out of the theater and I was like I'm living in a different, like there's been a before and after that has occurred. It actually reminds me, I was about to say you have a quote. There's something that you said that I remember stuck with me about comparing like a book to leaving a movie theater during the day and your eyes adjusting. That to me is like a very like one like great metaphor to comparing that to like an emotion. But then anytime that went on to happen, I was just like ding, light bulb went off, and like that happened as well because it was just like the middle of the day and I watched this like weird ass movie in like a good way that like I came out of and I was like, that was insane. And then like leaving it and being like, it's 3 p.m. Like it felt like the world had changed and like, or more that I had changed and like the world was not like reflecting that change. And I was like, this was crazy. Like this was crazy, capital C. So I think that one was probably just like cemented as a favorite. And I don't know, controversial to say. Obviously, like I'm not speaking ill of the dead, but there is some stinkers. Like there are some movies of Lynch's that I do not like at all. Eraserhead being one of them, which I get is like not a popular opinion, but I hated that movie so much. So
why did you hate it?
I think I was like coming off the high of like Mulholland Drive and being like, David Lynch, who the hell is this? Because in my head, like I knew so little that David Lynch and David Fincher were the same person to me, and so like I like was trying to find out more. And so I was like, Eraserhead, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I was just like not into it at all. Like I didn't like it. It just wasn't for me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get that. That was actually my first Lynch. So when I first watched it at like 16, I was like, what the fuck did I just watch? I mean, that baby though,
Yeah.
whatever that was, stuck with me forever. And then I think I rewatched it last year where I had like a stronger appreciation for the film as a whole. But yeah, there are some stinkers, especially the shorts. The shorts, there are some that are just like, what? What is he on about? But also to go back to that feeling that you were talking about like stepping out of the theater from Mulholland Drive and it's 3 p.m. What Lynch does, scarily enough, is that most of his horrors also just don't exist at night, but they exist during the day, which is unfair, I feel like, to just the human lived experience. Is like we have always been brought up knowing that terrors exist at night, but when Lynch brings terrors in broad daylight, it's just like nowhere is safe. You don't have daylight to be safe. Nowhere is safe.
There's no
that's
respite.
Yeah, and I think that's what complicates sort of the terrors and horrors of like dreamscape and reality for his films. But do we do a good job?
I think so. I had fun. Hopefully, anyone else listening will take something from it. But I had fun.
I didn't want to go on for too long. I know you had a long.
Yeah, this is perfect.
Day.
Yeah. No, 9:30 is a-okay. We went for an hour 8 minutes, so I feel like there's definitely that's fine. Like as a big chunk where you could like, cut that into something. I don't know, but what else are you reading? Like what's on your radar?
I'm gonna pick up this real soon. Jacques Cousteau's Le Menace. It's literally like a pamphlet. I don't know what it's about, but my friend finished it in 15 minutes. But it's essentially the same story over and over again, but less. It like begins the same way, but then it like condenses itself into like a singular line. So it's like playing with form and where it's the same story, but can the same story be told, say, paragraph to basically a line?
In fact, you can get some like, clever condensations of that, where like you can be like really reductive, and it's something that I remember like when I started getting into movies, threw me off a lot was like hearing like listening to like revered directors basically like recommend something or like blah blah blah. The example specifically I'm thinking of is like Scorsese doing some like international film intro, and he's like the way that like established and people who have like been like in the scene for so long like will talk about like a movie that you like hold so like belovedly and like as this like grand experience, and you're like, so in this whodunit caper, and it's like to reduce it like to like a genre that's like so trite. I'm like, damn, like I guess it really is that, or like the way that like people, there's like the saying that like there's only 3 stories, and it's like man versus man versus God, man versus self, or whatever. You can reduce stuff so much. So I'm sure like in that like short story, you could like say like something so small and like it still represent like the whole story.
It is reductive in a way, but I think it's also in the limitations of like, does it still remain as a good story? Mm-hmm. But it's so funny because Scorsese has been doing the same story for what 50 plus years.
Yeah. And defaults back into it like regardless. Like like the last hour of like Killers of a Flower Moon, it's just like, and now it's a Prison Break gang mob boss movie, and it's like, okay, we're here again. Took us a while, but we got there.
Isn't that what most artists do, is that they tell the same story over and over again, just to different maybe conclusions or different images and different decorations? Like say Murakami, right? It's the same story. Moshfegh, in essence, is kind of the same story as well. They have this thing, or this question, this ultimate question that they're working towards, but that all their books are just different answers. Do you feel that way about, say, the beginnings of like your music making or like vlogs or videos? Or
the question could just be like, how are you doing? And like everything is just like an answer to that, like in like a different form basically. But yeah, I feel like everything I'm doing is kind of just that, just me like answering the question like, how are you doing today?
And I think that's what essentially this video, or however we'll cut it up to be, is that, right? Is how do I answer that question? But I'm gonna answer it collaged, all the feelings, everything. I want to give you everything.
Heard.
Anyway.
I have some ideas still. The questions aren't like that taxing or anything. It's more about just like acting on it, and I feel like I've been like storing so much potential energy. That, like once this is done, I'll be able to just be like, all right, step 2, and like just blah.
Oh, what book are you on? Gonna pick up soon.
Oh, I'm like 80 pages into Intermezzo. I'm giving it a second shot. I got it the day it came out. I did like a midnight release party. I was so excited to like be like of the moment for it, because she's a name. Rooney's a name that like I've heard so much, especially like in the short time that I've been like in the online book world, and I'd never read any of her, and so I see that Intermezzo is going to come out in like a month, and for one, I should definitely just ask for arcs because I've never done that, and I probably could have just gotten one. But I was like, I'm just gonna wait, and like the day of, like I'm gonna be there like at midnight when the chime drops, like and get the ebook on like Libby. But in that like month lead up, I was so excited that I like read Normal People, I read Beautiful World, Where Are You, in like that short succession. And so then I get Intermezzo and I start reading it, and I'm like, we're doing this again, of like the hot people miscommunicating, the Catholic political angst, and I'm like, I can't do this. So I just like returned the book immediately, like 20 pages in. And then by the time I wanted to get to it again, there's been like a 3-month hold on it at the library. So I just got it, like a week ago. And I've been making some progress. The bigger book that I've also been like battling my way through is The Pale King, which is the David Foster Wallace book.
Yeah.
It's interesting. In like a...
Is
it interesting? Because it's actually not. Like it's again like doing the thing where, I don't know how familiar you are like with his short stories and stuff like that.
I've read The Pale King. I can't tell you what it's about.
Oh, yeah.
It was a long time ago, but that's the unfinished one, right? Mm-hmm. Posthumous.
Yeah.
But it does the same thing that Infinite Jest or say whatever.
This one's working better than Infinite Jest did for me, which is weird because like subject matter, it's like way more like dry and like banal, where it's just like dudes at the IRS chilling and like thinking basically. But like I just get the impression like in a lot of his short stories as well that like he'll start with like the setting and try and like condense it to be like the most boring, sterile, like clinical, like affronting thing possible, and like try and like push his way through it through like word choice and like elaborate storytelling structure. It becomes like redeemed after the fact, where it's like, damn, you made that interesting, you're the GOAT, bro. But like it is a slog in the moment. Like it is painful. Although you do end up with that like realization where like I'm like, I don't even know, like 300 or so pages in, and so like I'm already like I'm on board, and I'm like, damn, like you're making me care about like these random like nondescript accountants. Like you're the GOAT, bro.
My thing on David Foster Wallace is that he existed in the realm of post 9/11, where America didn't really know what to do with itself but exist in the offices and cubicles and have your silly little sitcom to make the day pass. And I think he was struggling with what to do with America and what America should do, because it was existing in this sort of gray space. There was another book by Joshua Ferris, I think it's called, but it was basically The Office, just in novel form. And so there was this like strong look at like these sort of liminal spaces, but in like that commercial, capitalistic kind of way, where there really is nothing to do after 9/11 but to continue working. And then it worked itself to death towards the housing crisis. And still, you're just like, okay, then what is a house? How should one be housed? And he was dealing with these complicated feelings. So I get the gist of like, I get these scenes that he's set up and says a lot about America. But I think The Pale King, I think it was published in 2016 or so, or 2014, something like that, where I think a lot more interesting writing was happening. So he exists in this like conflict of like, where should American literature go? I think in that time, he's presented a lot more interesting interviews that are essentially the reductions of all of his literature. But I still think he's worth reading. I liked Brief Interviews with Hideous Men.
I read that as well, yeah.
Yeah, because he does fun things with form, and he has a lot of interesting things to say in his essays as well. But I love that he always critiques America in that way. I would like to revisit some of his stuff. I think Nora was recently talking about that essay collection he had on tennis. Was that you? I forget.
I think I know what you're talking about. I don't think I've read the tennis one specifically, but there was an essay about tennis in a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again. I don't know if that's the same thing, but
or if it was a collection. I forgot, but I think it's called String Theory, something like that. But yeah, no, I like his brain. Interesting place.
He has a good voice, and he poses like good. I think it's like all coming from a good place, and like seeing the little like glimpses of like empathy and like humanity that's like just really easily like articulated and like consumable, direct. Makes all like the other surrounding like orbiting stuff worth it, even though at times it's like, damn, we're doing this for a while.
Yeah,
but I think I'll finish it. I hope I do at least. But
yeah,
I'm just kind of chugging my way through books. I've also slowed down. Like January was a really busy month. In February, I'm like only like 3 or 4 books in. It's already like about to end.
For you though, does like the beginning of the year start in January or February? Or March?
I've never heard that question before. I don't even understand.
Like for me, I've been so busy December, January that I'm just like February is where I'm like, okay, let's cool off. Let me like actually set like put in notes and stuff, and this actually feels like the beginning of the year. Or like when it hits January 1st, you're just like, it's a new year, baby, new year, new me.
I don't even think it's like January 1st. I think, I don't even know. Maybe it's like based on the weather. Like as soon as it got cold, I was like, okay, I'm ready to like reflect. And like set up some goals for myself. I also live in Texas though. So I feel like it's like hard to, like, unless you're looking at the calendar, you don't know like what month or day it is. Like it is just a coin flip every day. So like there's no like consistent, like gradual or like, you know, temporal phasing type thing going on. It's just like, okay, I guess the year's over. And then like there's like a winter freeze that happened, and I was like, okay, the year is over now. Like there's been like an external stimulus confirming that like something has changed.
It reminds me of California a bit, where California just has like 2 seasons essentially, and so you never really get these progressions of change. Whereas in like here in Korea, you do have like a solid 4 seasons, so you really do move through the changes of the year. But yeah, in California it's just like it's either summer or spring, and that's it. Would you ever go to California?
Sure. I don't have, well, let me actually think about that, because I would say yes, like as in like accompanying, like if one of my friends, sometimes I go to like LA and stuff, and it's like sure, I'd go, but like on my own, do I have like the inclination to on my own? Not really. I don't know, it seems like a very like extroverted city. Sure,
same thoughts on New York,
but New York, I feel like it's not as extroverted, even though people there are like perceived as like outgoing and like more exuberant or like exaggerated. I feel like it's almost more like individual, and so it sort of like leads to the little like, not hypocrisy, but whatever like the thing is, where it's like despite there being like so many people, you feel so alone, like the urban loneliness or whatever, because I feel like everyone is like turned inwards and like, you know, like self-oriented. Maybe they are in LA too, just in terms of like everyone cares about their own career or whatever. I don't know, I've never been to either, so this is just like a general perception. Okay, I think I am ready to go, but it was really nice talking.
All right, yeah,
I think
thanks for this
really well,
but I think we did a fantastic job. Thanks, Pato. Always
Peace.
Joy.